The 4-step method to high-performance trading and the 7-step daily routine for high-performance traders are both free downloads. The 4-step method for high-performance trading is about developing the mindset and the routines to increase your confidence and your ability to execute your trading edge in a live trading environment. Constant progress. 7-step daily routine for high-performance traders is an audio program download designed to help traders bulletproof their day-to-day habits, discipline, and develop a winning mindset. Again, the link is in the description box below. They're free downloads. Let's get started. Just reminding traders, if they're new to this channel or if this is the first time you've seen this video, if you go to this playlist, everything you need is in this playlist as it is titled. We go over the templates, the timings, the levels, the behavior of price. This will help to bulletproof your understanding of the best trade setups in the playbook. Again, these are free videos on the YouTube channel to support and enhance the skills and the development of your trading prowess within the playbook itself. Everything you need is in this playlist. Good day, traders. Stacey Burke from Stacey Burke Trading. Today we are going to be going over one of the most powerful opportunities we can get on Wednesday, day 3. The day 0 opportunity for a parabolic trend trade, page 84 in the playbook. And that aligns with a 3-session setup on day 3, a parabolic 3-session setup. It's also a 3-day setup. Monday's day 1, Tuesday's day 2, and Wednesday is Free Cash Wednesday for day 3 parabolic opportunity, which comes to understanding the importance of Monday's opening range and initial balance. This is one of the best setups to look for on day 3 on the Wednesday. Parabolic trend trade or reversal opportunity depending on how the market sets up in our opening range and initial balance. Now, I've repeated this phrase several times, but today it's going to have much more importance when we go through this, and you'll understand the importance of Monday's opening range and initial balance for a potential day 3 parabolic opportunity. When you get a range expansion, the market is sending you a very loud, clear signal that the market is getting ready to move in the direction of that expansion. Paul Tudor Jones. Now on Tuesday we may get a range expansion, and we may also get a failed breakout. And in some cases we may get an inside day. Not that common on a Tuesday. Most likely we will have either a range expansion or a failed breakout, a peak formation reversal. Now, when we get an opportunity where we see a range expansion, which we'll look at in a moment, often traders are calling that a failed breakout, and that is incorrect. And for the purposes of a day 3 parabolic, occasionally an inside day may show up on a day 2, but it is not that common. But if indeed it does, there may be an inside day opportunity, which we also cover in the playbook. Again, the importance is recognizing whether or not you have a range expansion or a failed breakout. Now, we talk about the inside day specifically in the playbook, but for the purposes of a day 3, day 0 parabolic, we're going to focus on the first two, range expansion opportunities and failed breakouts. Now, Monday sets our initial high and low for the week. It can be in any range, any type of day. We're going to look at some different examples today, but when Monday trades, that's our opening range, our initial high and low for the new week. When we head into the new day, we can have a day that may trade back inside, as I said, an inside day, not that common, or we'll see a day maybe set up where we get a range expansion day. Now, part of the problem is that traders are calling a day that pips the lows or ticks the lows without fully breaking out. They're calling that a failed breakout, when in reality, we may just have a range expansion happening. So similar to Asia London, where we get opening range, initial balance, we may see that range extended and come back inside. We can get a failed breakout. We can have a day that actually trades lower and reverses, and in some cases closes back inside, maybe even as a first green day or an up closing day. So remember, any type of day, even when it's a signal day, what matters is how does it trade on the following day. But Monday, Tuesday, that's our opening range and our initial balance now. We have a range expansion on the downside, or we may have a range expansion on the upside. however subtle it may be. We may have a higher high and a low, whatever that is, but that's our opening range and initial balance, the first 2 trading days of the new week. When we come into our day 3, we could have a range expansion and we can lower that bar. The market is potentially sending us a signal that there is still other time frame traders underneath here that are interested in doing more business. But what matters is how does it set up on our day 3? Now, coming into our day 3, we may have a range expansion. Either side doesn't matter, but we will form our opening range in Asia. That market can do anything. We can have our initial balance after session 2. But what matters in New York is, number 1, do we have any major red news? And if we do, we wait for the news, as we talk about in the playbook. The parabolic trend trade setup is a 3-day setup, page 84 in the playbook. Traders who counter trend this market will get blown up. DNC means do not counter trend on the way to fulfilling a range expansion target. And that's what tends to happen, is that on day 3, the market will go on a range expansion and traders are trying to counter trend it at the high or low of that day, and the market will continue to move in that range expansion direction. Page 87 specifically says no major news releases scheduled. So what that means is, if that opportunity presents, either waiting for after the news, and as I mentioned earlier today, if you're not experienced, just waiting for after that news release. For experienced traders, they may be targeting a first bounce or a first bar opportunity. And if there's no major response to that major red news, we go back to work using our normal universal 5-minute entry criteria, which is on page 29 in the playbook. So if we had major red news and the market has had that news response and we have our universal entry criteria met, an entry can be taken. And the thesis is that this market now is going to go on a range expansion, potentially, on a day 3. And in this particular case, we can use the range of the existing day. In other cases, a market may have already been breaking down. We can come back up and consolidate this. Market may have already been breaking down prior to that session beginning, pulling back, and a low-hanging fruit trade entry opportunity that's targeting a range expansion of that opening range itself on the downside. 2 types of opportunities on a day 1, day 2. We're either going to have an explosive reversal trade or trend trade if the market has come into that from an existing long trend, or we may have a range expansion that continues in the direction of that range expansion on day 2. Opening range, initial balance, after major red news has taken place, meeting our universal entry criteria. We can see other situations arise where we may have a failed breakout and the market may trade back down into that peak formation low before consolidating and going parabolic back through the high of our opening range, which is the high of our new week in a parabolic reversal setup. The importance of understanding Monday's opening range. Now, if we had a market that was in breakout on day 1, closes out of balance, and continues to trade in breakout, that's a different setup that we cover in the playbook. The day 3 parabolic for the day 0 setup comes when we have an opening range and initial balance that forms a box. Whether we have a range expansion on the downside or the upside on day 2, it forms a box. And the thesis is that we are going to coil if the market sets up properly for a parabolic trend trade or reversal trade, depending on how that template has set up and the instrument that you're targeting. Let me repeat though, do not be surprised on a Wednesday when we get a parabolic trade setup. It rinses and repeats, and they're scalable in size. We're going to walk through a few pairs, but I want to emphasize that we're finding the instrument that has the best setup that correlates to this criteria, not trading your favorite instrument thinking it has the setup. We want to find the best setup on any instrument regardless of what it is, and then locking in on that instrument, shutting the other 25 charts off, and being really focused, shutting off chat rooms, social media, everything else, and tuning in to the job at hand. Is there any major red news? If there is, wait until after the news is released. Today we had non-farm ADP, non-farm employment change at 8:15. The Canadian dollar had GDP. Now we had the Fed later in the day, but I'm talking about the 12 candle window heading into our US session. Now we're looking at the Japanese yen. We had a market that formed our opening range on day one Monday, putting in a high and a low. That market continued to auction lower before reversing in the New York session. We had a range expansion on the downside. The break of Monday's low of day also confirms Monday as a potential day one with a peak formation high. Now I'm going to repeat this. Remember what I said. It is not a failed breakout for starting a new day count until another daily level on the opposite side is broken. Now we have Monday's opening range, and we have a range extension, lower lows on the downside on day two. And as Paul Tudor Jones says, sending you a very loud, clear signal that the market is getting ready to move in the direction of that expansion. Now I can already hear people saying, yeah, but we don't know that. It could be a failed breakout. Correct. So what do we need to see on the day? Now we have a 3-session setup where we're looking for parabolic opportunities for a range expansion. We have major red news at 8:15. Our criteria then says to wait until after major red news is released on a currency pair especially. Now we had major red news released at 8:15 a.m. We have a pattern within a pattern, as Peter Brandt would call it. Smaller rectangle at the high of our day. Our initial opening range in the Asian session. We have a range expansion in London. And we have the collapse back inside of our universal entry criteria for a potential range expansion opportunity on day 3 in a day 0 setup. Monday, day 1, Tuesday, day 2, and Wednesday, day 3, a day 0 parabolic opportunity after major red news in line with our universal entry criteria, a lower low on the inside. Lower low on the inside is the setup for the pump and dump. Same as we go back to our 1 hour chart now, we have a lower low on our range expansion on day 2, a potential signal now. We'll zoom in on this, a potential signal that the market is getting ready to expand in that direction. There's our peak formation on the upside. They pump it back up into the peak formation a second time, and for the collapse back down in line with our universal EMA on Free Cash Wednesday. Again, I want to emphasize an opportunity to position yourself at the level, closing price after major red news for the continual, just gradual collapse and the parabolic blow off for a full range expansion of the high of day, low of day on day 3 on the Japanese yen. And I will also point out that that took out the low of the previous week. US Canadian, we have an opening range on Monday that, take a look at this level, took out the low of the previous week in our opening range, continued lower on day 2, Tuesday, day 2. So we have a potential range expansion again on the downside, a market that continued to move lower later in the session. Opening range, initial balance. Market may potentially be getting ready to move in the direction of that range expansion. At non-farm ADP and Canadian GDP at 8:30. Just coming back to some simple processes again. The opening range was expanded in the London Europe window. We had first had an initial higher high, then made a higher high heading into major red news. We had our non-farm ADP release, and then the market engulfed just prior to that. We had Canadian GDP right after that, where there was a first bar opportunity on the 1 minute. We'll look at that in a second. And again, targeting a full range expansion of our high low. Now this actually completed, if we back this up, look at our 1 hour chart, that is a full range expansion of Monday's opening range. So we had an opening range breakout that continued on day 3 in line with the direction of that original expansion on day 2. We already have an existing short trade in place, but because we waited for GDP to be released, that gave traders the opportunity for the first bar entry after the GDP release in line with the larger time frame setup. So I repeat, these are always in line if it's a news candle entry with a longer time frame setup, and that market continued back down to the low of the day, which is where I mentioned traders will get caught trying to counter trend a market on a day 3 that is continuing for a range expansion target. So again, just getting in at the higher low of the day, not thinking that it's going to be a reversal or trying to catch a move back up when there's actually no setup. That market continued for a range expansion. We see later on the Fed that market's pumped back up to the high of the day. But the original opportunity for a day 3 parabolic trend trade existed after major red news on the Canadian dollar for a 50 pip move. Next, we're looking at the euro. So we have a market that on Monday breaks the low of the week, Friday's closing range, and goes higher on Tuesday. Makes a higher high on Tuesday, opening range initial balance, a range expansion on the upside. A range expansion on the upside. Now, we have a potential 3-session setup coming into the U.S. session, but this is opposite. We have a market that may now be potentially offering us a reversal signal, and also we have a first green day setup potentially. First green day is an opportunity that we go over on page 64, but that also correlates with our day 1, day 2, potentially a day 3 parabolic opportunity now for a day 0 trade setup. We have our major red news and the reversal. We just go back to our opening range initial balance. Just for simplicity, we have a dump and pump template, higher highs on the inside. Back inside of our universal EMA, targeting potentially the high of not only the week, but Friday's closing range where the dump began. And you'll notice as well, not staring at little candles trying to guess where to get in. I'm always looking for a level, targeting a level, and where I can manage my risk and looking for that range expansion opportunity. And if things couldn't get even more timed and measured, if we take one distance down to where our low of the day level was and we project that on top of closing price, amazingly enough, it pretty much aligns with the high of Friday's bar. Everything is timed and measured, but a parabolic day 3 opportunity on the euro for day 0 setup after major red news. British pound, we have a market that has set our opening range. We've broken Friday's low of day and pulled back inside. And then we make a slightly higher high on Tuesday, day 2, and a lower low. But hold on, Stacey, you didn't talk about a day that expands the range on both sides. Well, that would be an outside day. Oh, we didn't talk about that, but what we have now is a range expansion potentially on both sides. So if you are going to look for a best trade candidate on an instrument that has an outside day, what type of template do we have set up on the day, Asia, London, and is there a parabolic opportunity? So we see the breakout from Tuesday's low of day reversal come back and coil sideways. We have major red news similar to the euro. We now have an entry price criteria at closing price, and that lower consolidation of the failed breakout or even the low of the day offers us a minimum range expansion of the low to closing price level. But again, universal entry criteria after major red news, entering in, we can have a 1-bar stop. With all of these, they're 1-bar stops. After the news is released, this is a 5-minute chart, we resume normal work. The market has digested that information, and now our thesis is that we are targeting back towards not only the high of the week, but a range expansion opportunity of this lower box where consolidation between our opening range and our initial balance. We have major red news for a parabolic range extension on day 3. Swiss franc, we have an opening range that breaks the low of Friday's range. So we have a range expansion on the downside with our opening range, does not break the low of week level. Tuesday is an inside day. So we have an example of where there's an inside day where it fails to break either boundary of the opening range, but we already have triggered shorts into the market on our day 1 and had a range expansion on the downside from Friday's low of day level. And as always, on day 3 then, timings, levels, behavior of price. We have major red news, but let's go back to a simple concept. Markets only do 3 things. They break out, they pull back, and they continue to trend. They break out, they fail, and they reverse, as we just saw on the British pound. Or they stay range bound in a trading range. If we are in a trading range and we have a candidate that is ripe for a day 3 parabolic after major red news is released, we would be targeting a 100% expansion of this opening range. After major red news is released, we can now position ourselves in the market. Now let's just go back in and understand that this is an opportunity that I'm hunting for. This is not staring at candles and wondering what's happening. We are looking for the parabolic opportunity on day 3. Now notice again, timings, levels, behavior of price. We have pushed up to the high of day level. If other time frame traders are driving this move, that's why we don't need to break through a high of day level. It is a parabolic trend trade. I had a question from a trader. Yeah, but it didn't hit any stops. Yes, it did. It hit them at the low of the week. That's the trap. Day 1, day 2, day 3, blowing off in the direction of the trend. Major red news has already been digested. Pump, break in structure on the inside, the lower low, for the pump and dump template after major red news has been released. That forms a larger descending triangle for the collapse off of closing price level for the range expansion on day 3. Gold, we had a market that made higher highs on Monday, broke out, pulled back, expanded the range on day 2. So we had a range expansion on day 2 that pulled back inside of our opening range. However, as we proceeded into our New York window, we had non-farm ADP on the schedule. We have a non-farm ADP release. We are sitting on top of Monday's opening range high. This market continues to auction higher and allows traders to position themselves with a starter right after major red news. Day 3, we're targeting now a range expansion of the high and low of the day. This market hit that target. Sometimes you can use the bodies, but the high and low of this range gave traders a 200% expansion of the range on day 3. Taking out the high of the week, so again, a dump and pump template. Question traders asked was, but why did it go back up? Remember, we have other time frame traders driving this move. They're short in the market. They're already in the market. It's going after the money. And if we back this up to our opening range, putting on a 15-minute chart, the market is out of balance on top of the opening range and already going parabolic into the end of the hour, accelerating into that second hour. At that point, I'm thinking 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours to the high. Other time frame traders are driving this move. This is not a 5-minute trade setup. This is being driven by hourly, maybe 4-hour time frame traders. And this is our 4-hour chart. So just as an example, understanding the opening range and initial balance can help traders position themselves for a potential day 3 parabolic. Now, some of the things that will affect this are obviously news that's on the calendar. We could have a 9:45 a.m. release. We could have other data that could affect how that weekly template sets up. But again, coming back to what I said earlier, I'm finding the instrument that has the best setup. I'm not trying to force my favorite setup on any instrument. Understanding when we get range expansions or failed breakouts and inside days or outside days. Remembering what Paul Tudor Jones said, when you get a range expansion, the market is sending you a very loud, clear signal that the market is getting ready to move in the direction of that expansion. Keep it simple, traders. Focus on the parabolic best trade setup candidates. Keep it simple, 1% better every single day, and may the markets go with you.